Hi, I've talked before that one of my favourite cameras is the Voigtlander Vito CD, and I used this in the summer and I was really pleased with the results. It's a super camera. Voigtlander made that in about 1957. In 1960 they launched this camera, and they launched a range of Vitos called the Vito C. Now, some of the Cs had rangefinders on, some had light meters. This has no rangefinder, but it has got a meter, and as I said, this is a Vito CD, that is a CL as well. It's a slightly, I would say it's a slightly dumbed down Voigtlander. I think by 1960 there was a lot of competition from the Japanese and from other camera manufacturers as well, and Voigtlander had placed itself in quite a high position, and the cameras like the Vitomatic and the Prominent were very high quality and expensive cameras, and I think Voigtlander were trying to get onto a slightly more popular market, and they wanted to get people who might have bought a point and shoot but wanted something a bit more serious. And so this camera is a little bit, as I said before, a little bit dumbed down. I think it's got a laser lens 2.8, so it's a moderately fast lens, but it's not like the scoper lenses. You've got shutter speeds from 250 down to bulb. You've got a slightly, this was very popular in the 1960s to have this, well, it started more in the 50s, to have this coupling with the shutter speed and aperture, which in one sense was quite good, because if once you had set your, on here, you set your meter to the arrow, and then you read off a number, and the number corresponds here. And once you've got that done, so let's say I was at a 30th of a second at F11, because it's coupled, if I go down to 60th, it then goes up to F8. I mean down to F8. And if I wanted, as I said, to go all the way to the fastest shutter speed here is 125, and that then gives me an aperture of F4. The focusing is in meters, and as I said, there is no rangefinder here. However, what we do have a range of red dots, which I think we've got one which is nearly infinity but not quite. I think that is for buildings. We've got or large groups, could be for large groups. We've got a middle one which I think is for groups. And then we've got another sort of small red dot, which I think is basically aimed for portraits. Still got this slightly strange Voigtlander idea of the counter being on the bottom. And to cope with this in the case, there's a hole in the bottom of the case. But I think the idea was that you wouldn't have to take the camera out of the case to know how many you've had taken. You could just look on the bottom of the camera and it would tell you. Winding back, you've got a lever here which pops up and you wind back the back there. The shutter is in quite a nice, I find that position on the front easier and more, actually you're less likely to move the camera there, so I think that's a very sensible design to put the shutter on the front here. And that is basically it. It has got a sensible back opening. If you remember on the Vito B, you've got this funny little thing at the bottom and you slide the film in, where here we have what became a very conventional back door to the camera here. The nice Voigtlander on here. This camera is in quite nice condition. As I said, the models which went from here seem to like some of the quality that you got in this model in the earlier models. I have used this. What I was really pleased about was the quality of photograph was still of that Voigtlander quality. The images were extremely sharp, or well, quite sharp. The downside was it just didn't feel like the Vito B. The materials aren't quite so good, and actually some of the later cameras were even more sort of plastic. It's an interesting camera. It definitely looks like a classic camera. If you find one you might really enjoy using it. I quite enjoyed it, but to me it just wasn't quite the same as the Vito B. Bye for now.